Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am your host, Otis Moss III, for Virtual Book Notes, sponsored by Trinity United Church of Christ and Unashamed Media. And we welcome you this evening to a wonderful discussion. I'm very excited that we have two amazing authors, two journalists, two sisters who are deeply committed to our history, to our heritage, and to our culture. If you are a first-time viewer for our book notes, all I want you to do is put something in the chat. Those who are working behind the scenes, our production team, they want to shout you out. This is the first time that you've ever been a part of this. We want to know this is your first time that we might shout you out. We are grateful that you are with us, and we are excited about the conversation that we are going to have this evening. But before we do, as we always do anytime we have a virtual book notes, we begin in prayer, and let us go to God in prayer at this moment. Gracious and most merciful God, the God of Jacob, the God of Deborah, the God of Moses, the God of David, the God of Isaiah, the God of Mary, we thank you, the God of our ancestors. We thank you this day as we delve into our history, our heritage, and our culture. We recognize that you have sustained us over the years, that you have walked with us, that you have held us, and that you keep us. And so may you bless this conversation, that it may enlighten, it may inspire, it may bless, and it may cause someone to operate with a Sankofa spirit, to look back in order to go forward and blaze new trails. We thank you and we love you. And the people of God who love God may say amen. Again, I am your host, Otis Moss III, for our virtual book notes. We are delighted. Renee, we're glad that you're here from the St. Paul community. T, we are certainly glad. First time, give a shout out to T. We're glad that you are here. It's your first time here. And so we thank you so very much. I want to introduce two tremendous and amazing sisters who will be a part of our conversation today. The first that I want to share with you, who is with us, is Myiti Sengstacke-Rice. She is the CEO of the Chicago Defender Charities. Many of you in Chicago, you know that there's a staple in Chicago. You're not a Chicagoan if you don't know the Bud Billiken Parade. It is the Chicago Defender Charities that sponsors this event, and Myiti created an amazing book about her family history. She is the great grandniece of the founder of the Chicago Defender, and that is Robert Sengstacke-Abbott, considered to be one of the first self-made millionaires in Illinois, had an incredible impact across the nation. And she has a new book that is been printed, curated by the Arcadia Publishing Group, that does a series of books called The Images in America, where they focus on the history of communities across the United States. But what's beautiful about it, it gives you photographs. These Images of America books give you historical photographs and the history behind those photographs. So you turn each page, you see amazing photos, and then they break down the history. You get to see, and I'll share some more about it, but you'll get to see some incredible photos, especially the way that people dressed. I'm going to bring that up to Myiti, the way that people dressed, especially during the 1920s. And it just gives you a completely different image than what Hollywood will give us in reference to who we are. We also are excited tonight. We have another journalist with us, none other than Deborah Douglas. She's a faculty member at the Northwestern Medill School of Journalism. And she has created an amazing book. And I want to recommend both of these books in your library, and that you would take these books and share them with your family. The book that she has created is in reference to the U.S. Civil Rights Trail. Specifically, it is a traveler's guide, the U.S. Civil Rights Trail, a traveler's guide. It takes you through Birmingham, Atlanta, Charleston, Jackson, Memphis. It lays out the stories of our people and the landmarks that you can visit. So when you go to Jackson, instead of just going to see your cousin, you can also take this book with you, and you can go to the spaces where we knocked on the door of freedom, where we took down the walls that kept us from being emancipated, and can learn the stories firsthand. You have the book of the Chicago Defender, more information about the Chicagoland area, specifically Robert Abbott, and you have a book on the U.S. Civil Rights Trail. And both of these books are incredibly important right now. Why? Because there is an intentional rollback of African and African American history. This current administration doesn't want you to know the truth. They're removing DEI from a variety of federally sponsored projects, diversity, equity, inclusion, and they're replacing it with a new DEI. The new DEI is actually, I heard one particular person say this, Reverend Marvin McMickle. He said basically the new DEI is didn't earn it. So we've gone from diversity, equity, inclusion, which God has always done in terms of creation, to didn't actually earn it, didn't earn it. And so it is important that we pick up books such as this, have these conversations so that we can educate ourselves and we can pass on the information to the next generation. I want to welcome our guests this evening, two extraordinary women who have done great work to educate our community. We welcome you to our book notes.
Thank you.
And Deborah, we welcome you.
It's so good to see you here.
It is wonderful to connect with both of you virtually. And I have to say that I have enjoyed both of your publications. And I want to say, on behalf of the Trinity community, on behalf of the Chicago community, on behalf of everybody who loves Black history, I want to say thank you for what you have done, because I believe your publication will bless generations not yet born, because you have put together a chronicle of our information. I want to begin with you, Sister Rice. I want to share with you, as I was going through your book, I was blessed with the fact that your great, I guess it would be your great grand.
Well, great grand. Yeah.
Great grand. I'm trying to get it all right.
That's okay.
Your ancestor.
Right.
Just make sure we get enough greats in there.
It's hard to keep up.
It's difficult to keep up, but your ancestor, who was the founder of the Chicago Defender. Mm-hmm. But what I found fascinating was your ancestor's stepfather. And this is for all of those who are part of Trinity United Church of Christ, your ancestor's stepfather, where the name Sengstacke comes from, which is connected to the German side of your family. Mm-hmm. He was a congregational, or what is now a UCC minister. Yeah. In Georgia, and was a race man.
Yes.
What were some of the other pieces that you picked up as you did research on your family that they were involved in?
He was very interesting, powerful man. John Sengstacke is his name. My grandfather also, his name is John Sengstacke. So when I bring him up, we won't be confused. but this was senior. And what's interesting about him that he also there's writings of him in newspapers about how he talked about how he would sit by the bedside of people who were sick and shut in and pray with them. But also, so as a minister, he did that. He also had a newspaper called the Woodville Times, which is part of Savannah.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if anybody heard of Weeping Time, which is a really, if you just look it up if you haven't. But Weeping Time was probably one of the largest slave auctions of all time. A very sad time, obviously, because they separated people from their children and families and all that. So that's hence the name Weeping Time. But there's actually it's been chronicled. I feel like it was a New York Times article or something it was in that someone gave me a copy of. But if somebody looks it up, you can find it. But that's the area they were in. So he started the Woodville Times. That's how Robert Abbott learned the printing trade from his stepfather and understood that you can fight through the power of, he said, the sword is your pen. The pen is your sword. So that's where he learned that the whole idea of being a defender of his people.
It was your Robert Abbott who has stated that he learned from his stepfather the idea that the paper is one of the greatest institutions for the upliftment of Black people. I don't have the quote exactly, but I was so moved by the quote.
Yes.
He's learning this from people who parents were, or they were formerly enslaved Africans, which I find just absolutely fascinating.
Very fascinating. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and to think about this man where did he get the gumption that he can do this? But again, he had support along the way. If it wasn't his stepfather, then it was when he went to Hampton University, which was Hampton Institute at the time, and his professors that pushed him along. Even the founder there, Colonel Armstrong, I believe his name was. And then as he moved along, the people along the way that supported him as he went to law school, but he realized he couldn't be an attorney as well. He was an attorney, but as a Black man at that time, it was very difficult. But he kept saying, I want to be a defender. And he went back to his roots of what his stepfather taught him. And that's how he started the Defender in Chicago in his landlady's kitchen with $13.25 borrowed.
$13.20. And you went quickly over the piece about him being in Hampton. He was also a singer because he was part of the Hampton.
Yeah, so when he was at Hampton, he was part of the Hampton Quartet. The Hampton Quartet's job was to raise money for the school. So they would travel around the country. And one of the places they stopped was 1893 World Columbian Exposition right here in Chicago. That was a foundation that helped build part of the South Side of Chicago. If you think about it, some of the buildings we see today are still there because of the 1893 World Columbian Exposition. And so there was the World Color Day, which was the day that Frederick Douglass spoke. Ida B. Wells was there as well. And when he was there as a young man and student of Hampton University, he got to meet them. He got to see them speak. He was very inspired. And that's when he determined that he was going to go back to Chicago. He was going to go to Chicago because he was from St. Simon Island, then Savannah, and then went to Hampton, then Chicago. And so he went to Chicago. That's where he really began to take off in terms of his advocacy. But he was inspired by Frederick Douglass and Ida B. Wells.
And then the trajectory of that from St. Simon's to Savannah to Hampton to Chicago. St. Simon's is connected to the Gullah community, an African community, people who kept their culture here in the United States, and then to move to Savannah, and then from Savannah, then be in the space of Hampton Institute, this experiment, they called it an experiment at the time, of bringing Black people together and educating them. Your ancestors were rooted in Black affirmation in a space that was unaffirming. to Black people, which is quite extraordinary.
That's a good way to put it. I love that. And I love, I'm blessed that, of course, they chronicled everything, obviously, because of the Defender. But even before that, I found in my research articles and things before the Defender was even published in 1905, which is really powerful. So they chronicled everything and hence kept all the images. And that's why we were able to compile images in order to tell the story. And that's why I just love the power of imagery, of imagery that tells our history. And no one can deny that, because as you were saying, they're trying to erase our history, but they can't do it because we have facts and we have proof, and visual proof at that. Yeah.
Now, I love the imagery that you put forth in the book. If you could share with us, is there one photograph that touched you in a major way? Oh, I love it. I love it. Go ahead. Promote right now. Come on now.
There's so many, but let's just start with the cover. Okay. First of all, because there's so much that's going on in this one image. This young man, I don't know his name, but they just happened to catch him. This is just, literally wasn't planned. It's not a pose. He was selling the newspaper, 1942. Okay. You can even see the headlines. It's very clear. But where he's standing is on 35th and what's now King Drive. It was grand. I gotta get my days together when it was a State Parkway first and then Grand. I don't know if you guys remember. King Drive was, I think, State Parkway, then Grand, then King. Okay. So anyway, but this is the Liberty Building. He's standing right there. And this has always been Black owned and is still Black owned today. And our office is in this building. So this was Liberty Insurance, a Black business. Then it became the Supreme Life Building. So I know y'all are familiar with Supreme, if you're from Chicago. Supreme Life, then Seaway Bank Building, another Black-owned business. Now there's a Black-owned, it's all women, Black-owned, it's like a CBD company. So it's like healing properties and things like that. And then there's our business, there's the African restaurant, but it's all Black businesses in there in this one, and there's a bank still there. And so that's why this is so powerful to me, because you can see this, and it wasn't planned, right on 35th and King Drive.
Oh, I love it. Absolutely beautiful and powerful. I like one other piece that I want to ask before I get to you, Sister Douglas, is there was an article that was written in the Defender that changed literally the lives of Black people, because they said, we're going to get up out of here, out of the South. And we're going to, and it was a series of articles, obviously. But if you could share with everyone that initial article that started the movement of what we call the Great Migration.
Okay. I just want to, before I forget, someone just wrote that their mom worked at the Defender and Supreme Life.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so great. That warms my heart. I was speaking at one of our sponsors for the Bud Billiken Parade, Discover, and I was speaking at an event yesterday, and I had a few people in the audience, and they were people that, this is their DEI department. They haven't gotten rid of it. They don't call it DEI. They call it Bold Force. It stands for something, but I'm sure the B is for Black. But anyway, and there were a few people in the audience that were sharing that they either worked at the Defender, they were in the parade. But that's one of my favorite just parts of being a part of this legacy, is just hearing the stories of generations that they have their own story and how it's all connected, and it connects us all. But back to what you were saying, there were headlines that said, come up north and prosper. There's more jobs than there are men to fill them. So, we're talking about activism and civil rights. The the Defender, before we even called it civil rights, was always a civil and activist institution. And especially, I would say the largest is, of course, the Great Northern Migration, which is the conversation that brought us the three together, talking about the Great Northern Migration. And we can honestly claim as Chicagoans that the Defender was the catalyst of the Great Migration. That they help push it forward in a way like never before. I can't even imagine what life would have been like without having that force of this newspaper that told people they can come and prosper. There's more jobs than there are men to fill them. And Mr. Abbott coined the term the Great Northern Drive. That's what he called it in 1917. And so, and made it official at that point, which is very powerful. And then out of it, what was birthed? Greats like Langston Hughes, of course, Ida B. Wells, all the people that we know, W.E.B. Du Bois. I mean, I can't even begin. John Johnson talks about how his family moved, to the north. Actually, even us sitting here, anybody you can think of, people that are listening right now, you have a great migration story. We all have a great migration story, which is so powerful. But yes, those headlines are what really did it. And then the question is, well, how did we get that paper out there without the social media we have today or the information age we have? The Pullman porters. Without the Pullman porters, we couldn't have done it. The Pullman porters had to sneak the newspaper on the trains and drop them off at various secret locations, and they would pick them up throughout the South, like on the side of a mountain. Say they go through Tennessee, somebody pick it up. They knew where the spots were. Now, how they got to each other, that's interesting. I do wonder that. I do need to do my research to find out how they connected, because they had to be secret about it to let them know where exactly to pick it up. But they had a plan, just like when the Underground Railroad, they had to figure out a way to secretly take them through. And the same with the newspaper. And they would spread it throughout the South. And that's how people began to go in droves up north.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Sister Douglas, your book is phenomenal. I mean, I love the fact that you have laid out for people. Do you have a copy? You could lift up your copy. If you have, oh, wonderful. Please do. Thank you. U.S. Civil Rights Trail, so that everyone can see it. I want people to know that when you are traveling, this is the historical Green Book for Black people. This is the book that will share where you need to visit, will give you information about the visits. Take us through. I'm gonna pick a city for you, because I've seen you do presentations before. Okay. So I'm gonna pick a city for you, and I want you just to break down places to visit along with the story. So since we're in Chicago and we have people here who are from Mississippi. Yeah. So let's start with Jackson. Well, Memphis and Jackson. Let's do Memphis and Jackson.
Let's do Memphis, the Delta, and then Jackson. That way we can be on 55, get on 61, go there. Okay.
Come on. I love it.
Okay. Of course, you have the National Civil Rights Museum at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. The beautiful part about this, and the heartbreaking part of it, is that history is not the past. It is right here, and you can walk right in the footsteps of it. So when you just mentioned Frederick Douglass and Ida B. Wells, the fact that we can go just around the corner and like literally walk in their footsteps, I call it the remnant aura, right? The remnant aura of history.
I like that.
You're walking in that. Yes. And so, of course, that's like the go-to spot in Memphis. Also at Claiborne Temple, that was the staging area where the striking sanitation workers in 1968 gathered to meet, to strategize, to just the stage marches. And so if you go to Claiborne Temple now, which is now being refurbished, under the guise of Claiborne Reborn, right outside in the yard adjacent to this beautiful church that's on the National Historic Register is a monument, the I Am a Man monument, this big,
Yes. Yes.
beautiful. And so it's a beautiful place of contemplation. So when things happen, people in the Memphis community go to that space, generally at the golden hour, because there's something deeply spiritual about that time of day. When day slips into night, when they gather to just to hold each other, to pray, and to commune and be community in that space. And again, in that remnant aura of the movement and those courageous men who stood up for themselves. So it's so much more that you could talk about in Memphis, but I'm going to get on Highway 61 right now and take you on down to the Delta. If you're coming from Memphis into the Delta, you're going to get to Clarksdale first, which I don't necessarily recommend Clarksdale so much for the civil rights story as it's a music mecca. It's a blues mecca. And there's a really nice club there called the Ground Zero Blues Club. And Morgan Freeman is the co-owner of that club. But the people in the town across race actually work together as a collective to curate this beautiful musical and cultural space. And I love the way they work together to the point that I have like lots of friends down there. And I think there's a house that I want to buy there. But there's the Delta Blues Museum that's kitty corner to the Ground Zero Blues Cafe. And if you go around the corner on MLK Boulevard, then there's Red's Club. Red died earlier this year or late last year, but his son is in the state legislature, and so he's running the club right now. So you can go listen to some blues. You can get some barbecue from the Big Ten can out in the front yard. And I like to blow up his son's phone when he's on the floor of the legislature when I'm researching. So. So there's that. There's a lot more in Clarksdale too, but if you keep on going down, you will eventually make your way to the ruins of Bryant's Grocery and Meat Market, where Carolyn Bryant stirred up all her mess, right? And that store is actually, that structure is in ruins, so it's falling apart. And one day it won't exist, but to be able to go into that space, there's a marker on the side of the road so you can read what happened there, so you can know what happened there, so you can behold the moment, right? And sit and pray.
Share a little bit about this for those who may not be familiar with the story of Sister Bryant.
Yes, so Emmett Till and his cousins went to the store one day, and after the kids left, she accused Emmett of being overly flirtatious with her. I'm not going to go too deep into the story, but we can just say that by virtue of her saying that Emmett menaced her in some sort of way, she put this child's life in danger, and everybody else associated with him in danger. And of course, later in the dark of the night, her husband and his half brother and some other people dragged him and took, well, we know what happened to Emmett. I don't want to go into the details of it, but as catalyzing forces go, Emmett Till's murder was the catalyzing force for the mid-century civil rights movement because of Mamie Till Mobley's decision to have an open casket funeral here in Chicago to expose us to the truth of the terror that happened to her child, which could have happened to so many other people.
And that story was carried in a very different way in the Chicago Defender than it was in all of the other newspapers in Mississippi.
Absolutely. The true story. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say, you asked me about what's the powerful image. The one we do own, the only open casket image of Emmett Till. I don't know. I know you all probably did see it. It's but his mom wanted everybody to see just the horror of what they did to her son, but she didn't allow the other press to go in there and cover it. Only the Defender.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're standing there, you're at the ruins, you could, it's really something to be able to contemplate, to be in that space and to take, close your eyes and be in that space and time. I don't know about you, but these things inform the way I show up every day. It also gives me the knowledge and the confidence of how I can be a part of this thing that we call the United States. And I believe that Black people are the people who make the United States what it's supposed to be.
Yes.
Dr. King said to be true to what you said on paper. And we're the people who make this country true to what it says on paper. So you're in that space. I've been there a few times. I kind of trespassed a little bit the last time so I could get really up close and personal. And I've done some prodigious photo documentation of that space. So that's that. So you keep going south, you're going to end up in Greenwood. As soon as you cross the bridge to the Tallahatchie Bridge, which I love for other reasons, the ode to Billy Joe, I stop and I get a snow cone right off the side of the road just as you cross that bridge. But if you keep going into town, then you'll get to Greenwood City Hall. And that's important because of, so many things, but like I got to spend time in the City Hall chambers with David Jordan, who's a state senator, and he was on the city council for the town at one point. So to be able to interface with people who represent the gains and the promise, and to see people responsibly wielding the power and their responsibility that was fought for during that movement means so much to me. Then there's the you can go to Sumner and you can go into the courtroom where they had the trial of the men who murdered Emmett. And we know that the all-white male jury did not find them guilty, but they so much as admitted it. But again, the first thing I did when I walked in that courtroom was I walked to the front and I went up to the judge's stand and I sat at the judge's seat, right? I took my power back. Across from that is the Emmett Till Interpretive Center. It's a museum that tells that story. And then in nearby Glendora, there's a Black-run museum called the Emmett Till Intrepid Center. So these are different kinds of museums that tell stories in different kind of ways. You can go to the Grable Landing where they believe that his body floated, over. It's just so much. You can just totally, be in the presence of this story. And so now we're going to go to Jackson now. So we're going to keep driving south. We're going to the capital city. And before we get to the capital city, we're going to stop in Canton, where my people are from. So I'm on 55 and I know the shortcut. So I'm going to take a little turn at Camden and go on over to Highway 43 and then drive on down into Canton, which is the county seat of Madison County, which is one of the 3 counties in the Tri-County area of Mississippi. And we're going to go to Canton Freedom House. And that was an organizing space for Canton. Actually, I started my career in Mississippi. So I was at a woman's home. Oh, what's her name? Minnie Lou Chin. I was at Minnie Lou Chin's house. Her son was a judge, Judge Chin. And I knew that the Chins were active in the movement. So I'm at Minnie Lou Chin's house one day in her kitchen, and I'm asking her to tell me about her activity in the movement. And she talks about the time Martin Luther King came to town, and he sat at her table and had a bologna sandwich, not a sandwich, but a sandwich.
Sandwich, come on now.
I got calls from all over the state from English teachers the next day that I misspelled it. But I'm like, we were trying to get the flavor of the sandwich this time, not the grammatical spelling of the sandwich. But a school was bombed a block away from the house. So I got to write about that. And so Freedom House is near where that bombing happened. And I actually got to cover actually I covered the whole county, but specifically the County Board of Supervisors, which wields power, the most power in the county. So I got to see that, in my lifetime. And one special person who would not give me an interview on the record, but I've talked to her many times, is Fonzie Wright Brown. She was the first Black woman elected to public office in the state of Mississippi since Reconstruction. She was elected to the Madison County Board of Supervisors. I told this Flossie Red Brown. She should probably give me the interview because we might be cousins, because that's the way things kind of work around there. But
Yeah.
she takes my calls, but she won't go on the record. So we're in Canton. We're gonna drive a few miles. We're in Jackson, and now we're gonna go to the 2 Mississippi museums. One is the State Museum of Mississippi that tells us the story of Mississippi from the original people, the indigenous people, all the way until now. And then there's the Civil Rights Museum, and it's an exquisitely done museum that tells the story not only of the Civil Rights Movement at large, but specifically the Mississippi movement, because every locale had a specific flavor. Mississippi concerns are different from the concerns of maybe people in Atlanta. When you think about the class differences, right? Like we had a common struggle, but we had very specific struggles that link to our particular class and our particular geography. And so that museum tells a beautiful story. One of my favorite things is that you go into one of the main galleries and you're walking through, and you can hear these sounds coming over the ceiling as you're walking through. And it's like, what you going in there for, boy? You know, it really takes you in that space and gets inside your head.
Question. So is it like immersive and traditional museum, like a combination?
Yes, it's immersive, it's interactive. There's if you keep going inside, you make it to the center of the Civil Rights Museum. Yeah. There's one room with a big gallery with a big light that looks like a ribbon. And the more people move to the center of this big ribbon light, the lighter the light gets. The more people disperse, the darker it gets. So it's a working metaphor.
Oh, I love that.
I know. Ooh, I will see it. Definitely.
And one of my favorite exhibits, I have to put this out there, Miss Herdesine Rankin. Miss Herdesine Rankin was a master quilter. I got to meet her when I lived in Mississippi. And so one of her quilts is on the wall, and it talks about the time that Pharaoh Humphrey shot her daddy and nothing was did about it. And so she's a master quilter. Her quilts are also in the new art museum in Mississippi. And Miss Herdesine has several children in the Chicago area. So shout out to Miss Herdesine.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. Well, we are going to now open up for questions. We have a community that wants to ask you some questions. We already have some people who've already shouted out to say that I need these books right now. So again, if both of you could please show your book onto the screen once again, the U.S. Civil Rights Trail and the Chicago Defender. You can pick it up. Images of America, Chicago Defender, U.S. Civil Rights Trail. We want you to pick up these books. We want you to pick these books up at a Black-owned bookstore. We want you to pick these books up at an independent bookstore. We want you to pick these books up, not at some of the large online retailers, but pick them up at a local space. Support local bookstores. If you would like to utilize one of the bookstores connected with Trinity, that is the Afroware bookstore. It's owned by a Black woman. We invite you to utilize that bookstore that is also online. But please, we invite you to pick these books up from a local retailer. But let's go to some of the questions. Let's see what we have here. We have some folks who are really excited and are so very thankful for the work that you are doing. And so we have a question from none other than Sister Gwen. Gwen, thank you so much for watching. Question to Sister Douglas: do you cover Mound Bayou, Mississippi in your book? Come on now, great history. I know you know about Mound Bayou.
Yes, I know about Mound Bayou and Unita Blackwell and all of that. Yes. Mound Bayou is not covered as a space. The thing about this book is that it covers the official Civil Rights Trail in the South. So if you go to U.S. Civil Rights Trail, you'll actually see an official site in these places that have been designated. So there are not any institutions or structures or actually places of racial terror that exist in Mound Bayou that have been put on that official trail yet. It doesn't mean that these things don't exist. It's that it's so much I could write about. So I had to stick really closely to the officially designated sites as much as possible.
Wow.
And our next question coming up, who do we have here? Yes, we have Charlene is asking, ordering these books, what would you suggest for kids who are not getting the real history at school, but want to learn more on their level? What are both of you, what are your suggestions for parents, for teachers, for grandparents, for aunts and uncles?
Well, I would say, and I'm not just trying to plug it because it's my book, but see, images make it a lot easier for all ages, and so I would say, for one, you can pick up, and not just my book, The Defender, but also there's a lot of Black, and I can't, honestly, I can't give you some titles right now, but if they look into it, there are some books that speak to, the earlier age groups that talk about history, that have the imagery with it as well, because I know that that's one way that stimulates the mind for the youth. So that's my suggestion.
Well, I actually have specific suggestions in my book about how to engage with your children with the book and the sites you're going to, because it can be some pretty heavy material, which is why I send you to Black-owned businesses, especially restaurants, to sort of balance out the heaviness of the day. It's specifically Black-owned restaurants that are tied to the movement, like for the Busy Bee Cafe in Atlanta, or Pascal's, or places like that. But I like a site called Facing History in Ourselves. I actually adapted one of my articles into their curriculum. And Chris Benson, who is the Till family biographer, actually has a whole curriculum on Facing History in Ourselves web interface. And so I would do what people did for us when I was growing up. I literally am a great migration baby. I was born here. My daddy ran a business in Austin. My parents split. We moved to Detroit post-uprising. She married a mean man, and so her mother helped raise me. So I went back down to Tennessee. I went to her church, and a lot of her teachers were either my teachers at school, like my librarian who just died at 102 years old, Miss Yarbrough, who grew up in the same house as Vernon Jarrett, her cousin, who radicalized her, and then she radicalized me. And she went and I went to the same church as Miss Yarbrough. So what I didn't get from my social studies teachers at school, I got from the Miss Yarbroughs of the world. Also, I would go across the street to the Taylor Family Library. So share your family materials. I'll encourage people to tell family stories. Ask an open-ended question, and then let the story spew forth. At the Taylor Family Library, I got to read all the books that this family had assembled from generations of going to Fisk University. So I started reading about the Bonnie Prince and all of these white authors that they wanted us to read about at school. I would go across the street and I inhaled everything that Maya Angelou had written at that point. When I was 11 years old, I got to my lifelong love affair with Langston Hughes started from the Taylor Family Library. So I think we need to start opening up our own homes and libraries and our own hearts and our own brains to start telling our stories the way we always have.
Yes. Very good.
Wonderful. And well, you are welcome, Antonio. We appreciate you being on this evening. Let's see who else we have a question from this evening. Please place that in the chat. Oh, wonderful question, Juana, about the Green Book. Do they use the Green Book to migrate? Let's share with.
So from my perspective, I don't have a specific story of someone using the Green Book to migrate. We know that Black people used the Green Book to figure out where it was safe to traverse. And so I would imagine after people were energized by all of those secret copies of the Defender that they had been reading, and they were on their journey up north, that they may have used the Green Book to figure out, where it was safe to move around if they were actually taking a more direct route to get up here. People got up here all different kinds of ways. So it may not have lent itself to that. Myiti, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I mean, really, our Green Book that I'm aware of is the Defender gave a lot of guidance to where they should go. So, but also, and Pastor Moss, you mentioned this before, how the church has had a big influence, a major influence on the Great Migration. which was also a big catalyst of that. So a lot of times the Black press, along with the churches, would collaborate and work together in order to get information out there, so people would know where to go and what to do and how they can get jobs and opportunities that were available up north. Especially the reason why it was like preparation meets opportunity at the same time is where how the migration really happened, because up north there were jobs because of the Industrial Revolution. And so and people just would write in and say, and give their credentials of what they did. That was their own way of, their resume in a sense. We actually still have a lot of those letters that where people said, I'm good. I'm a great cook. I'm a great, and just whatever their skills were, they would write into Mr. Abbott, and Mr. Abbott would, give it to the proper wherever he knew to help them get position, jobs, housing, all of that. So just like we have, what's today? We have Indeed and all these other programs we have today. That's what we had to give us guidance into, opportunities.
We have a question from Donna. She has a great question in reference to the challenges you all faced when you were gathering the data for your book.
Can I tell you about Calvin Woods, Reverend Calvin Woods?
Please.
Okay, so this is Birmingham. So this is the Birmingham campaign. This is, the water hoses and the dogs and everything. And Reverend Calvin Woods, I was talking to him, it was a few years ago. This is the first edition. I'm actually working on the second edition now. But I was asking him who was at the meeting where they were meeting to form the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights, because they needed to replace the NAACP because Alabama outlawed it. And so they met at, I can't think of the man's name, but he was a billionaire. A millionaire Black man. Oh, what is his name? Anyway, it was at his business. It had to be at a Black man's business. So I'm like, well, who was at the meeting? Like, if you go online.
Was that E.D. Nixon? Was that Nixon?
No, it wasn't Nixon. It'll come to me in a second.
Okay.
There's a whole museum open.
Or Gaston.
A.G. Gaston.
Yeah. Okay, Gaston.
Okay, it was his building. Okay. If you go online, if you ask the founding, they'll say Sardis Baptist Church. Okay, that's what's on the record. But there was a meeting before the meeting, because that's what Black people do. We always have a meeting before the meeting. And the meeting before the meeting, I'm like, well, who was there? And I'm like, were there any women there? And what kind of jobs did they do? I'm like trying to get a real good picture of the people who took a chance to come to this secret meeting. And he finally said, young lady, don't nobody want you to know who was when and where and how and everything. We said that it was a secret. And we said who was in the room. And I'm not telling you now. So I just like to say word was bond then and the word is bond now.
I love it. Beautiful story. Beautiful story. So how did Donna I'm sorry, please, Myiti. Please.
No, to answer that, she's right. It's interesting when you talk to the elders, sometimes it's hard to get them to talk. I think they were kind of, what's the word? Like they were silenced a lot of times. And if it wasn't for, those that chronicled the stories the best way they could, we wouldn't have them, because our elders I remember I was doing research on the Abbott side of the name, where it came from. And I went to the Historical Society in Savannah, and I actually saw information on the family from England that bought the 4 enslaved Africans, but they didn't have a name. And I was super excited. And I came in to tell my Aunt Vi, who's 93 years old now. And I said, oh my God, I think I found the people that bought our ancestors, the Abbotts. And she just turned around. She looked ashamed and sad and just acted like she didn't even hear a word I said. I think it's painful too. You could tell there's a lot of pain. There's shame a lot of times, with the elders. And so where it's easy for us to just say, this happened and that happened and that happened. But when you talk to, and you know, I hate to say that whole generation is pretty much dying out now, but when I have talked to people who were there throughout that Emmett Till experience, you can hear the pain in their voice and everything that went around, that was around that and surrounding that. You know, you can sense that it was a lot of pain in our community, and hard for them to talk about it, actually, and they were still traumatized by it years and years later. So that, I feel like that's one of the challenges, was that when I'm talking to the elders, is just them being able to really share, because of the pain that it would bring and bring back up.
We have a question from Galen Rose. And her question is, did travelers encounter sundown laws when they were migrating from the South?
Yes. Sundown towns all over the place. We still have some sundown towns. We don't talk about it out loud, but they exist.
And Donna has a question. We had a question that was coming up from Donna. How do we keep young people interested in our migration stories?
You know what, Professor Douglas, you really answered that very well. So I think that, but one of the things that I did as I taught, you know, in school, was that the assignment would always involve a migration story, and I would implore them to find out what their own migration story was. So I would ask the students, where's your family come from? And so a lot of them would say Mississippi, Arkansas, Georgia, different places like that. And then I would, you know, then go into the story, but you have to make it, there has to be a connection to the person, which I think then it evokes interest when you make that connection to them and let them know that you are a product of resilience of a people that have fought, you know, and that when you do that and and they're included and they say, okay, this is how I got here, it just gives them a whole nother sense of, you know, interest in it.
Yeah, that reminds me of the entrance to the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. On the wall, as you walk in the main entrance, there is an installation that talks about the 6 ways that we resist. Because we have always freed ourselves. We free ourselves over and over and over again. And those 6 methods are escape, revolt, petition and protest, community building, achievement and success, and defiance. So we can interface with those 6 ways to resist in our everyday lives. You can make a whole game out of it, right? How are we going to resist today? How are we going to achieve success today? How are we going to build community today, right? And I like being really creative with kids. So I would like pair it with something, like go ask somebody who's older than you a story, but also let's think about our favorite food from where our people came from, and let's like make a recipe, right? Let's make something. I learned how to make pecan pies by just sitting and talking to my grandmother, and I figured out that I didn't have to buy the pecans. I could hire local boys to shake the local trees. I would split the shake with Pookie Smith. He would sell them at the grocery store, and I would come home and I would bake the pies. And I got that from sitting and talking with my grandmother. So now that's ended up being a whole thing, and people look forward to my pies to this day. So you can create new traditions.
I love it. I love it. Well, I want to thank both of you for being with us for our book notes. The chat is blowing up with people who are saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate you all. And again, lift up your books, please, so that people may see your books. We are encouraging you to pick up a copy. Pick up a copy from a local bookseller. Pick up a copy from a Black-owned bookstore. Please support on 2 levels, the author and support the businesses that are selling the book. And do a review of the book. Online reviews, good read, all of those things. Those algorithms are utilized by publishers, and they determine whether they're going to publish another book. They just go in and look at the algorithm to see who has written a review to say it was a good book to read, not just if someone bought it. So we want to thank both of you, and we want to thank our village community for joining us this evening for our book notes. And we want to say thank you to the production team, none other than our Uber producer behind the scenes doing the work. All of the sisters. Matter of fact, I usually don't do this, but I'm going to ask that the sisters who are doing the work in the background, can you bring them on for a second so that you all can see this amazing team of people who do this great work? And we are so appreciative of all of them. Reverend Sue, Minister Donna, Erica, and Reverend LaShandra. We thank all of you for producing the book notes. This is our book notes here at Trinity United Church of Christ. I'm your host, Otis Moss III. We're all part of the same community doing the work, and we thank you for being with us tonight.